Hello, Dickinsonians. This is Annie Kondas. I'm the Associate Dean in the Center for Advising, Internships, and Lifelong Career Development. I'm here today to talk with you about salary negotiation. I always find it interesting that I do the salary negotiation webinar about once a year, and it's always one of our most popular webinars. I do believe it's because it's an area where clients have shared with me that it is very scary to kind of think about how they would go about doing a salary negotiation. So my goal for you today is to try to demystify that, really make it so that you feel confident and comfortable moving forward with your next negotiation, whether that be for a new position or if that is for a raise at your current place of employment. So I'm going to go through kind of a three-step process of what you need to do to prepare for a salary negotiation. You'll notice on my slides that I'm pulling this information from AAUW. I am a certified AAUW salary negotiation trainer, so I use their content for a lot of my coaching with clients. So you'll notice that is branded throughout this workshop, and that's why. So we'll talk about knowing your target salary and benefits and where you should be and how to make sure you're asking for the right amount. We'll talk about strategies to use before you were to get an offer and after, and then how to practice and you know some ways that you can move forward with practicing. So the first thing I do want to talk about is why it is important to negotiate. I like to throw up this slide to talk about earnings and when you do go forward with negotiating, how it can have an impact over your lifelong career. And so you can see here, this is based on 2016 data about women's earnings is when we did the initial study, but also breaking it down by race and how men are much more likely to negotiate than women are, and white women are much more willing to negotiate than women negotiate versus women of color. That does not account for why necessarily the different percentage on the dollar is accounted for, but is one of the reasons. And so I just want to share this slide for you to show you that the impact that it can have on your starting salary. But then also what it means when you don't negotiate right off the bat, coming out of college or into a new career, and that it can have a lifelong wealth determination. So you can see how much a woman will lose over the course of a 40-year career by not being at the 100% on the dollar, and same with African-American women and Latinas. And so you can think about this in your own regardless of your race or gender, you can think about this in your own capacity of that. Did you negotiate that first salary? And what does that impact have on your career and your earnings moving forward? So that is why we really, really would encourage you, no matter what, to negotiate, no matter what. And so I will put that out there. So what do you see as your biggest challenge in negotiating your salary? So I'm going to throw that question out there to anyone that's on the line. If you could just type in the question box your answer to why are you afraid? I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to type up an answer. Why are you afraid to negotiate your salary, or why don't we do it? So go ahead and take a few minutes and type in the response box why you don't. Fear of not getting the job, feel like I don't have enough experience, fear that they're going to say no, fear that they're going to pull the job offer from me, fear of looking greedy or being told no, being scared to ask or being embarrassed to ask, feeling selfish. Yeah, don't know what number to propose, kind of feeling lost there. Being laughed at before and actually being laughed at for the number they're proposing, worried that they'll go with another candidate, the owner being told that the owner might revoke job offer if they were asked to be flexible in the salary. don't like pushing myself forward. So a lot of it is that people responded to great answers. A lot of what people responded to was very much this fear of like, they're going to think less of you, or they're going to pull the job offer from you, and that it's going to be worse on you for negotiating over not negotiating. But recognizing that and I always say, for 30 minutes of pain, if it's fear, 30 minutes of fear, you can have a lifetime of increased earnings over the course of your life. Really, is it really thinking about it that way? Like, I'm going to go through 30 minutes of really awkward negotiation, but it's going to have potentially a $500,000 lifetime earning, which $500,000 is money in your retirement account. $500,000 is a vacation home. $500,000 is a lot of vacations. $500,000 is college for your children, college for multiple children. And so just recognizing that, yes, you might be afraid to do this, but if you could put fear aside to do this, the impact is going to be greater. So the first thing we're going to talk about, we do move fast in this webinar because it's only 30 minutes. So I'm going to start talking right away about knowing your target salary and how to know what you should be asking for. Someone mentioned that they're worried that they're just not going to know what they should be asking for, and they're going to shoot too high. I think that's always a fear, is you're going to shoot too high. Some people say, I worry I'm going to shoot too low, but usually they're worried about shooting too high. I remember once in one of my first job salary negotiation, I shot actually too low. I asked for, I don't remember the number, but let's just use random numbers, $35,000. And the manager thankfully said to me, oh my goodness, no, we anticipated paying you $47,000. And if the manager felt differently or was a different person, they could have said, yeah, that's great, 35,000, great, and go, and that would have had impact for me. So it's really important that you know what that salary is. So 6th step to benchmarking your salaries. You should be researching and identifying comparable job titles and comparable jobs. And I'll show you how to do that in a second. But you really, really, really need to know when you're going into any sort of job process what the median salary is for that job. You can do that in a few different ways. I'm going to show you a site in a second that's going to show you how you can find that. Then you're going to find the salary range and establish your target salary. Once you identify your target salary, you're then going to move up 10% from that target salary to create your, what we call like that range. So there'll be that target salary, and then there'll be that range. In doing this, it's important that you assess your budget off of that. You will never negotiate your salary off of your budget. So a salary tactic I do not recommend ever is saying, well, my budget requires that I make $100,000, therefore I should make $100,000. I never recommend that, but I do recommend doing a budget to make sure that you can actually afford to live and eat off of the salary that you're asking for. You want to determine your resistance point, which is determining your walkaway point. Your resistance point is based on a bunch of different things. Some people will have a number in their head, and usually it's your budget. If you cannot live off of a certain amount, I think it's okay to have a walkaway point and a resistance point, because all you're going to do is put yourself into a ton of debt or really have to change your living in order to be able to afford the job that you're going for. If you are somebody that is taking a lower paying job to try to get into a different industry or get different experience, that's okay. Then if you're taking maybe a lower number, but have that in your mind that you recognize you might have to take a lower amount. But do have that walkaway point if that's not the case for you. Also, assessing the value of benefits. And so I know that people will say, I work in education. Others of you on the line probably work in education as well. Educators are not known to be paid super well in the field, but they are known to have values of benefits. For instance, if you're working at a college, you might have college tuition for your children. You might not have to pay a lot for your health and medical benefits. You might have 4 weeks vacation. Those all can be calculated into a value of a salary. So if you know that time off is really important for you, what are you making every hour? So you might be talking in terms of, you might be talking and speaking in terms of salary over the course of the year, but that does come down to an hourly rate. And if you're given 4 weeks vacation, you can almost calculate that's how much more you're making because they're paying you to be off. So that should factor in. Same with, you should always know what their health costs are. So if they're charging you $100 a month for a health plan versus $500 a month for the health plan, that's all gonna eat at your bottom line. And so how much is that for you? So don't always just look at the number of salary that they're given, even though that's what you're possibly thinking of. So the site that I recommend that you use to determine your value is salary.com. There's a bunch of sites out there that will compare cost of living, but salary.com will at least give you a base in an area. You have to be very careful in salary.com. Let me make sure I'm not. Yeah. When you put in your job title, many of our job titles are overinflated. Or underinflated, but when you put in, and let's say that you are the director of public relations, but you are somebody right out of college and they gave you the director of public relations title because you are the only person doing public relations in your company. Likely you're not a director of public relations, because if you put in this box, director of public relations, what's going to come out is probably $150,000 salary for somebody that's overseeing public relations for a multinational company. So when you go in and put in public relations, you're going to want to really look for this job description here. You can see here typically requires 0 to 2 years of experience. You can read about what they do. Most likely this is going to be a public relations specialist 1, which is an entry-level public relations person, versus someone that is a director of public relations with 10 years experience. So in salary.com, there might be public relations specialist 2, 3, 4. So that's why it's really important to actually don't go by the title, but actually read the description. You then want to put in your location. After you put in your location and job title, there are a series of questions after that it will ask you. It will ask you questions, things like the prestige of your degree. That makes a difference into your salary. How many years of additional education you have? How many years experience do you have in the field? And it basically pulls an algorithm. You can use salary.com. Some people like to use Glassdoor as well. Glassdoor is actual data from employees, so it's self-reported data. Sometimes that can be good because it's actually the employees self-reporting their data on Glassdoor. Other times people are just trying to throw numbers in there to get through to get the information they need, because it requires you when you enter Glassdoor. So just be cautious with Glassdoor. It is self-reported. Salary.com is reported by companies. We work with the National Association of Colleges and Employers, which is the association I'm governed by, works with employers to collect salary data. And so that's the data that's showing here. The challenge with salary.com is sometimes they're also looking at bigger companies. And so I think it's important to compare both Glassdoor of what employees are saying that they make, as well as salary.com. So look at that, look at Glassdoor, look at salary.com. You can also go into something like Indeed.com or LinkedIn and start looking to see if there are salaries posted for jobs, similar jobs, because oftentimes they will have the range posted. So you can start to see a public relations specialist one on salary.com says it's $40,000. On Glassdoor, it's saying 45, and on the postings online, it's saying 42. So you're going to start to get a picture. So I wouldn't always go with one, but you can see here, salary.com is the one that I showed you this example of. Okay. So setting a target salary and target salary range. Once you have all this data of what you think the position's worth, salary.com actually allows you to, this is where you'd put in like your education, your years of experience, direct reports, how many direct reports you have, who do you report to, is it the CEO, is it the president, what's your performance like? Then you'll get this graph here. You can see here the median annual salary in whatever location I put in to do this. I don't remember what location we pulled, is here, which means it's the median salary. I would never go with averages. I'd always go with median because there's always going to be outliers that are throwing off the salary. You'll be at $49,000. That is 50%, meaning 50% of people are about at this. You have to determine your worth then to determine how far that you want to be up. So some people will say, well, I'll add 10% to that, which 10% of that would be about $4,000, $5,000, somewhere in there, $4,900-ish to go up. So your range would then likely be your median, which would be 49,343 to 40, I can't do my math in my head, to 54, something like that. That would probably be your salary range. Now, if you are somebody that has been in the field longer, if you are somebody that has exceptional skills, like you've had multiple internships, you've had multiple careers, and you are really known as some of the best, you probably may want to be up here. That is the 75th percentile of what people make. If you're somebody that's pretty new to the field, pretty green, and you're really trying to get into this job because you want, you really want to get in and you don't really have a ton of experience, you might actually be more down here. So I'm not telling you because you're new or green, you should take 32,000, which would be way down here, but I'm saying you might not be the median. So you really do have to assess your skills and assess your value in congruence with this. So once you set, let's say you are about average, say you are about the average PR specialist, and really try to be, honest with yourself, maybe ask some friends. You would be here, and then you would add that 10%. So the salary range you'd be asking for, I think it might be on the next slide. Yep, there you go, the target range. That would be your target range. So I recommend no more than 20% as a stretch. And I think that really depends on who you are. If you're somebody who is very, very nervous to have this conversation, or you've already gotten wind that there is a fear that they might pull the offer if you go too high, I think 10% is appropriate and considered completely normal. Most employers know that you are going to negotiate. I've only had once in my whole time working with a client, somebody come back and pull the job offer because they over-negotiated. And they over-negotiated almost 30–40% of the income. And the reason they did that is because they really felt that they could not live on the salary that was given, and they really felt like they were worth $60,000 and they were being offered $40,000. It was a huge jump. And the company basically came back and said, you know what, this is probably not going to be a good fit. Like, you're going to be unhappy. We can't pay you $60,000. We're going to go with someone else. That's happened once. Most of the time it does not happen. But if it's something you're worried about, or you've gotten word that it could happen, you want to only go up that 10%. If you feel like they're being, really low, you could go up to 20%. Then you'll determine your resistant points, that walk away point. That is after you ask for the higher salary. If they're not able to get it, you do feel like you can walk away if you can't afford to live on that, because it's going to impact you if you stay with that company down the road. If you get 3% raises over the next few years, which is cost of living, it's not like your salary's not going to change that much. So if you start low with the hope of, well, I can get a raise in 2 years and bring me up to what I want, it might not happen. So when I talked about this range, I'm going to go back here, this target range of 49 to 54, likely that's going to come out when they ask you in an interview what your salary expectations are. My recommendation, I'm going to talk about this in a second, is to always try to put off that question. Don't try to answer that question in an interview. If you are negotiating for a raise, this would be an appropriate time for you to bring that up because you actually have to cite a number. But I just want to make that clear that I'm not advocating for you to go forward with saying this is my target right away in an interview. I'm just helping you understand before you go into the interview, this is what you need to prep. Do consider the benefits. These are all benefits. I'm not going to read them all that you can negotiate. So if they say to you, we're going to offer you $50,000, that's what you're going to get. There's no negotiation here. That doesn't mean that they wouldn't be able to negotiate flex time, family medical leave, health insurance, life and disability insurance. All these things can be negotiated, and you want to negotiate them. I get the question a lot of people saying, well, what should I negotiate first, salary or benefits? And I usually say to them, it really depends on what's most important to you. You want to negotiate the thing first that's most important. So if you know you want to negotiate salary and benefits, if salary is the most important thing, you want to start with that conversation. I oftentimes will sometimes say, if they say no to salary, if you're kind of on the fence and you're not thrilled with your salary, but if they say no to it or that they can't match where you are, you then can say, well, I see that you're going to, you're not able to go up on salary. Something that would be helpful and that would be a compensation to me would be able to work from home 2 days a week, because that would save on the expense of traveling to work. I would like to see if I could work Thursdays and Fridays from home. That is a compensation piece because you're not doing that expense commuting into the workplace. So, or you're not spending as much money on dry cleaning to be in the office 5 days a week. So if they can't budge on money, you know that you can do this. So then it's about knowing your strategy. I know some questions are coming in. I will address them at the end for sure. So just so you know. Knowing your strategy. So this, I put this here because as much as you can deflect from talking about salary, the better. So if you get the question, what are your salary expectations? Deflect. Can you tell me your salary history? This question is illegal in some states. Some states it is not illegal in. In Pennsylvania, it is not illegal to ask someone their salary history. I think in California it is. So make sure you know what that is. I hate that question. Salary history does not indicate what you should be paid. And I recommend if you do get this question, I think you can say, my previous history does not reflect this current position, and move on from there. So you'll get, and then you'll also get, I need to know what salary you want in order to make you an offer. So if you get these questions, there's a few strategies that you can use. If you get these questions, you can say things like, I expect that your organization's salary is competitive with industry standards. And I, would be happy to be flexible and talk about that if you determine that my skills meet what you're looking for. So it's a really nice way to say, I don't want to talk about this now. And they may push you. They may say, no, we need to know. We need to know what your salary expectations are before we continue on this interview, because we don't want to waste your time. We don't want to waste our time. If you do get that where you are being pushed and pushed and pushed, you can say that you've done your research and you found data-wise that the average salary for this position would be somewhere between $49,000 and $55,000, and you would expect something in that range, but that you'd be happy to talk about specifics once you are farther in the process. So it's fine to say, just keep it data-based, like this is what it says this is for, but I'm sure that we can talk more specifics when we get later. So you want to use some deflection tactics right away. So then you get the job offer. Make sure to bring notes with you. Notes would include things like your resistance point, what your range is, what benefits you think you can negotiate for. Definitely remain positive. Don't show your cards. Don't show you're upset with the offer. Don't show that you're thrilled with the offer. Sometimes they're like higher than you think it's going to be. It's really not meant to be a battle. It's meant to be a conversation. And it's just really meant to be where can we meet on this, and where can we make sure that my value is being represented in my salary. I recommend don't get personal. Never go into, well, my husband just lost his job and I just moved into a new house and my budget doesn't allow for that. That does not matter to the employer and it doesn't look good on you. Keep it data-driven and keep it skills-driven. So once you have a chance to really understand your skills, you want to have those written out. Those are the things you want to be talking about, not your personal finances. Anticipate the employer's reaction and responses, and remember that the employer picked you and they want to make it work and they want to finish this process. Usually they really do want to meet you where you're at, and sometimes it's someone else telling them that they can't. They're going to try to work for you if they're excited about your skills. Most people do not want to go back to the drawing board with a new hire. So I would highly recommend you keep that in the back of your mind, that they did pick you. The ball is in your court. You have the upper hand once they give you this offer. You want to always make sure that you're getting the offer in writing. Sometimes they won't give it to you in writing until negotiating happens. If you can get it in writing before negotiating happens, I recommend it. It makes it so that they can't go back on that word. So if they say they're offering you $60,000 and then you start negotiating and then something comes out in writing that's not what you'd agreed on, it could be very confusing. So if someone says, we want to offer you $60,000 and benefits, you can say, great, I would love to think about that offer. Would you be willing to send that to me in writing and email so that I have everything written down of what I would be getting? So that's the first step, get it in writing. Sometimes they'll come back to you and say, well, no, we're not putting anything in writing until we have this conversation. I don't prefer that because really you don't want them to go back on that number, and they can if it's not in writing. So always ask if you can get it in writing. So here's some sample starting language that you might want to use. So employees saying, thank you for this opportunity to work for your company. I'm wondering if we can explore a slightly higher salary of $60,000. My market research showed that as an industry average for this area, and I'm confident you'll be happy with how much I can contribute to the team because of my knowledge in, and then that's where you put in your value added here. But you can see how it's upbeat, like you're really like, thank you for the opportunity to work for your company. I'm really excited about the offer, but I think that my salary should be higher because of my market research and because of my skills. If you are uncomfortable talking about yourself, which people are, talk about data. Data is usually more comfortable to talk about, which is your market research on your salary. So the persuasive negotiation. These are some tactics that employers tend to use for you. So, or I don't want to say for against you because that sounds negative, but oftentimes they'll say things like, you'll have an opportunity for raises in the future. I don't love that because that's not in writing. It's not written down that you will have in 5 years an opportunity to renegotiate your salary. If that's something they say, you can get that written down into your offer letter that says at 1 year you will receive a 10% raise after you gain some experience. So that is something that you can negotiate. So if they do say that, I would get that in writing and what that percentage is going to be and when. People say I don't have a budget for this high of a salary. I'll never be able to sell it to the boss. Usually they're trying to push it off on someone else. If I give you this salary, you'd be the highest paid employee in the position in the company. And then obviously yes, no, and oftentimes, unfortunately, we don't have room to negotiate. So what would you say to these? And so I always recommend a few different tactics if you get these responses. And so if you have the future for opportunities for growth and raises, that's where you say, okay, great, after 1 year of performance, can I have in writing that I will be able to receive a 5% raise? So right now you're not able to meet with me, but later you would be. So that's a tactic you can have. If you say, I don't have the budget for this high of a salary, that's where you can start talking about, you can either move down, so you can say, okay, I understand that, but then would you be able to meet me instead of at 55,000 at 53,000? If they come back and say, I don't think so, you can always ask, is there anyone else that you're able to talk with? If they're still saying no, 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 that's when you start to negotiate benefits. Or if it's your resistant point, you say, unfortunately, this isn't going to work, and you walk away. I'll never be able to sell this to my boss or HR. That's when you start saying back to them, I have these skills, these skills, these skills. I would encourage you, if you would be willing to talk with your boss about these skills that I'm bringing to the table. You wouldn't want to be the person to say, well, don't let me talk to the boss. I wouldn't recommend that, but to reiterate your skills and then ask them to go and talk with the boss. If I give you a salary, you'd be the highest paid employee in this position in the company. A response to that I would recommend would be something along the lines of, I believe that I have a lot of value added, and if I am the highest paid employee in the company, or in this position in the company, I will work to that level, and I will be one of the best employees in the company. So obviously, if you're the best, you should be the highest paid employee in the company, and that's okay. Obviously, there's yes, there's no. No would definitely be a chance for you to negotiate benefits or negotiate down. And then unfortunately, you don't have room to negotiate. That would be something where you can then start to negotiate those benefits, flex time, sick leave, transportation costs, vacation. So I want you to feel that you don't have, you have a response to what people are asking of you. So it's really important to keep that in mind. So at this point, that ends our quick and dirty. I'm going to go back to the front slide. That ends our quick and dirty of the salary negotiation workshop. I've opened to questions. I know a few came in when I was talking, so I'll do my best to answer those now. And if you have anything else you want to think about, feel free to put that in. So someone asked, at what point in the interview and hiring process do you have a salary negotiation conversation? So I briefly touched on that, but the salary negotiation conversation really should not be until you have an offer in hand. So if you start talking salary before you have an offer, the ball is not in your court. The ball is in their court, which means that they then can craft your destiny and your salary. So if they don't make you an offer and try to get you to talk about salary beforehand, you could then be underselling yourself. Or if you have a conversation too early, then they will get in their head that you are potentially worth less because you've thrown out a number. So the longest you can hold off on a number, the better, is what I recommend. And I recommend that they make the first offer. And if they're not pinning that offer, or if they're trying to get you to say that number first, just keep back with them that you are flexible, that you're open to market value, that your skills are at market value, and go with that. So these best practices work in industry. How about for government, state jobs, Fed? That's a good question. There are certain industries that do not negotiate and others that really do negotiate. There is some room in federal and state to negotiate, but usually it's based on your level, and that's what you're negotiating. I've worked with a lot of folks that want to negotiate in like a state job or a federal job, and they can't negotiate salary because they're all banded, but what they've negotiated is a higher band. So for instance, you can say, I see that this job is for a level 1 clerk, for instance. Based on the experience I'm bringing to the table, I would like to include my internship experience with my years of experience because it was such an in-depth experience that I had that really gave me excellent knowledge of the field. I believe because of that, I'm more at 3 years of experience instead of 2, which would put me at a band 2. Then once you're at that band 2, you're at a higher salary point. So you don't have as much room in state and federal government to negotiate your salary, but you can negotiate what they're putting you at as a band. So I would use that tactic for those industries. Education's kind of the same way. It's hard to negotiate education. It's easier to negotiate band levels and say, well, I know I don't have my master's, but I have all the coursework towards my master's. I believe I should be at a master's level band, that sort of thing. Someone wanted to let folks know if they're living in New York that it is also illegal to ask for salary history in New York. So that's good to know that people should not be asking you that. Unfortunately, if you're in Pennsylvania, you still have to answer that. Or you can just do what I do and not answer it, which is what I do in job applications. I just don't address it. And, you know, because I just don't think it's relevant, and it's a way to continue to keep certain demographics down, and I'm very open and honest about that. So, age discrimination. As a 50+ worker changing careers after a 10+ hiatus due to caregiving, how do I negotiate salary? What level of responsibility? That is tough, because if you've taken a hiatus, you almost are acting like an entry-level employee again, because of being out of the field, and that is, it's being out of the field. And so I think it's really important to know what your value added is. And so if your value added is that you have years of leadership experience, leadership doesn't change. Technology might change, other things do change, but you are probably going to have to sit down and try to figure out, yes, you might not be at the salary you were at 10 years ago, but what is a reasonable salary for the years of experience? It's hard to say, oh, well, I have 30 years of experience, because 10 of those were out of, 10 of those 40 were out of the field. So you might want to look at both the salaries of somebody that's been in a position for 0 years, as if you're an entry level, and look at someone that's been in the field for 20 years and see where that midpoint is potentially between them. It is a hard one, because it's sometimes hard to know how they'll value your experience, and it really depends on industry. What would you recommend doing if you're required to list expected salary in the application itself? So if it says that in the application, what are your salary requirements? If you're able to write flexibility based on market research or based on market value, that's what I would write. I know, as somebody who's done many hiring processes here, because I've supervised a few people, we do ask that at Dickinson. I don't know why, but we do. And when somebody comes in and puts that salary down, I look right at that to see if we can afford them. And I've dismissed, and I'm sad to say it, and it's not something I'm proud of, but I've actually dismissed people because I was like, they'll never come work for me. I can't pay them what they expect or what they were making. But if they put flexible based on market research or market data, I'm more likely to interview them. And for all I know, they want to work here because of the tuition benefits, and they don't care about the salary, or they're changing careers. And so the second you do put a number down, you are, kind of making it tough then to negotiate in the future. So I would really recommend trying to not do that. If you cannot get around it, meaning that you must put a number in because that's how the application's set up, just be very cautious of doing your market research. Try to put a range if you can, and make sure that you're somewhere in there. If you can even add something that said, like, this is the median range for this position based on data. That is a hard one. Can you please repeat how to deflect the salary range question? Usually it's asked before interview with an HR person you meet with first. Yes, that is true. If somebody says to you, I would like to know your salary range because we don't want to move forward in this process if we can't meet your range. That is where you say, based on my market research, I believe that this company would be, knowing the procedure of this company, you would be within industry norms. I am somewhere, my salary requirements is in line, sorry, I'm stumbling on my words here, in line with what market standards are. So HR then, HR is doing their own research as well. They should know what that means, which what means is, like, you're not crazy over market data, because they're looking at their own market data. And so basically you're just saying, I'm within market data on industry standards. If they still continue to push and push and push and say, no, 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 we're not moving forward without a number, you might not be able to get around that, but I would recommend deflecting to I'm flexible within market standards first. Then if they say, no, we need a number, you can say, based on my research, the market data for this industry shows that I'm anywhere between 55 and 60,000. I'd be happy to talk salary once I'm later in the process, but that is what the industry data says. So you're not saying you want that, you're just kind of saying like you think that you're somewhere in there. It is hard to do, but the more you can do it, the better off you're going to be. If the job posting does not list any salary and just says based on experience, can you ask for a range or for more salary information before applying? I'd probably not recommend that. I would probably recommend applying and going through the process and having that conversation. I think whenever you bring up salary early, you are putting you're putting it out there that it's not about the fit, it's not about the what you're going into. I would probably recommend waiting on that and not asking. Let them bring up salary. I usually say the candidate shouldn't bring up salary. How much, if at all, should you emphasize life skills, emotional maturity, positive, social skill, crisis management? I think you should absolutely emphasize skills as long as they're relevant to the job. So if you are somebody who is in a job that's working with a team, talking about emotional maturity, positive social skills, crisis management, those all make complete sense for you. If you're someone that is, doing data entry, I don't know if, well, I actually think all those things could be useful. Maybe it wouldn't be as noticeable. I don't think you should just say, I'm a more mature candidate. I can talk about being mature as important if it's not relevant for the job. So it should always just be relevant, but I think those are great skills to emphasize. Yes, you will get a copy of this. Someone asked if I can get a copy. Yes, I'll send that out to you. In your opinion, does having worked part-time in a field or multiple years weaken being able to negotiate, or do you have to disclose that previous positions were part-time? You do not have to disclose, and I don't recommend putting that they were part-time. The experience you got, whether you did it for 20 hours a week, 30 hours a week, or 40 hours a week, is still the same experience. The skills that you gained from a 20-hour, 30-hour, 40-hour week job are still the same skills. That's what matters. So it doesn't matter that it was part-time. That's another reason not disclosing your salary, if you can, up front is good, because they don't, oftentimes part-time positions are paid less, and that's not necessarily relevant to a full-time position or wouldn't be equivalent. So I think that's a good question. So are there specific sources you think are most reliable for market research on salary averages? I don't know if you came in late, but I did talk about places to look. The salary.com is based on industry data, so companies submit that data. Glassdoor is individuals submitting. It's less reliable because we don't know if individuals are actually submitting their accurate salaries in there. And I would just be careful, even with industry publications, like my industry has a publication, and they'll put something like a college administrator. Well, I'm a college administrator, but so is the president of the college. And so that can be really, really arbitrary. And so I would say whatever you're looking at for salary, it needs to be about the position description and not about the title. And that's what's going to give you. But those two sources that I shared with you are the best for getting the data. Obviously, if it's government or education, they usually publish that data, so you can pull that up very, very easily. All right. Someone's a legal recruiter in the Philly area, and I can tell you that in PA, while asking about salary history is not illegal here, Philadelphia has made it illegal to ask that question. Although I believe there's a legal challenge to this at this time. I do not ask salary history. However, sometimes candidates blurt it out without my asking. So basically someone saying that they're working on it in PA. So for those in PA, there is hope. I'm thankful to the person that wrote that to say that they are working on it. And I agree, not blurting it out would be a good thing not to do because it is probably going to make your salary lower when you start earlier. And those are all the questions that came through. I could talk about salary negotiation for probably 2 more hours, but this was only supposed to be a 30-minute webinar and we're at 45 minutes already. So I'm going to sign off now, but if you have any questions about your individual salary negotiation process or you're about to go through one, I'm happy to consult with you through a phone call, make an appointment, because I know everyone has different situations and sometimes it is hard to get everything you need over a webinar. So thanks for tuning in, and I look forward to having you back on future webinars to learn some more professional development skills. Thank you. Have a good day.